Hello everyone and welcome back to the Armchair Sociologist. In today's lecture, we are going to explore one of the most important steps in sociological research, sampling. So once you have chosen your topic and research method, the next big question is, whom do you actually study? That is where sampling comes in. It is about selecting a smaller group of individuals from a larger population in such a way that they represent the whole. In this session, we will go step by step from understanding what a sample is, how researchers identify the target population and sampling units, to the different types of sampling, both probability and non-probability type of sampling. By the end of this lecture, you will not only understand how sociologists choose their samples, but also the strength and limitations of each type of sampling, from random sampling to snowball sampling. So let us get started with the topic, choosing a sample. So let us get into the first part, that is choosing a sample. Once topic for research is chosen plus method is decided, we need sample, that is actual individuals to be studied. Sampling is selection of who or what to study. So after we have framed our question and the method, whether it could be survey or interview or observation, we now we can't study everyone. We now have to choose a manageable subset, that will be the sample from whom we will collect our data. So what is a sample? A sample is a part of a larger population. Here the word population refers to the whole group we care about, and sample is a smaller portion drawn from this entire group. It is usually selected to be representative of that population. So what is our aim? Our aim is that the small group, the sample, should mirror the key traits, the key characteristics of the entire group, the big group. Let's say with respect to gender or class or age or region, so that our findings can reflect the entire population. Those included in the sample are chosen as a cross section of the larger group. So cross section here means a mini version of the population, not just one corner of the population, not just a partial part of the population, but a proportion of the people with relevant characteristics as present in the entire population under consideration. For example, if the entire population has 60% male and 40% female, so when we are trying to cull a sample out of it, draw a sample out of it, the population, even the sample should have male as 60% and female as 40%. So this is the definition of sample, that a sample is a part of the larger population, usually selected to be representative of that population, and those included in the sample are chosen as a cross section having the same proportion of characteristics of the larger group. Now we come to use of samples. Samples save the researcher time and money. Also, it is possible to generalize. So sampling reduces cost and effort. If well designed, it lets us infer patterns about the entire population. Now we will get into stages in sampling. Now we get into the stages in sampling. The first stage in sampling is identifying the target population. We need to define who exactly we want the results about. Population here means all relevant sampling units. Now, in that particular population, the population is built from the units we could sample. It could be made up of persons, or it could be households, it could be schools, it could be firms, etc. From that target population, next we need to identify the sampling unit. Once we have decided who would be our target population, from whom we want to target our study upon, now after that we need to identify the sampling unit. Sampling unit means that it could be an individual person or it could be a social group in that population. So sampling unit is the unit, the thing we pick to study. It could be a person or it could be a household, a classroom, it could be a firm, it could be a village. And after we have identified the target population and identified the sampling unit, we need to obtain or create. Obtain, it could be a secondary source, or we need to create, sometimes we need to create, that is a primary source, a sampling frame. What does sampling frame means? It means the master list from which we are going to draw names. Now we will take example of study of voting to understand these steps, these concepts better. Let's say the first step when we say that identify the target population. So in example of study of voting, this population will mean all who are entitled to vote. So all people who are entitled to vote will come under target population. Sampling unit could be an individual voter. Maybe we need just to study that individual voter and that person's experience, or we may even select an entire group. It could be an individual person or a social group in that population. And third, sampling frame. Sampling frame here for the purpose of voting will be electoral register. Now here we must understand that electoral register or any other sampling frame may have certain real world or practical problems, which could be that it could be incomplete or there could be omissions. For example, in cases of homeless people or migrants or even prisoners. So there are certain risks attached to this sampling frame that we might miss names of mobile or marginalized groups, or there could be risk of certain bias, and certain people's names might be missing. But overall, this is the uh, how the sampling goes about. The first stage where we identify the target population whom we want to study. Second, we select the sampling unit, we identify the sampling unit, and third, we create a sampling frame. Now let's get into types of sampling. So sampling methods are broadly divided into two types: probability sampling and non-probability sampling. Probability sampling is one where each unit has a known or equal chance of being selected. It is scientific, representative, and generalizable in nature. Whereas non-probability sampling is one wherein each unit does not have an equal chance of being selected. But non-probability sampling is practical, exploratory, but not generalizable. So now first we will see what are the various types of probability sampling. So here in probability sampling, it is chance and not personal choice which decides who get selected. That is why it is considered scientific and unbiased. So first is random sampling. Here each member has equal chance of being selected, of being picked. How do we achieve this? We achieve this by assigning numbers and picking randomly. It is like picking names from a hat. Everyone has a chance, everyone has an equal chance of being picked, of being selected. So it has advantage of being unbiased, objective, simple to understand. But it has a very huge limitation wherein it needs a complete list of population. It is time consuming. It is time consuming because it needs large sample size. So to counter this problem, we get into systematic sampling. Systematic sampling is one wherein we select every nth individual from a list. For example, 10th name on the voter list. It is based on law of averages. It is less random but quicker. So it is easy, it is quick, it is efficient, but it is not truly random. If there is a hidden pattern in the list, like there is an alternating male-female names, let's say there are hidden patterns in the list, then that can cause bias in the selection. Why? Because we are selecting the nth individual, let's say the 10th individual. And if there are certain hidden patterns in that list, if the list itself is having certain patterns, let's say of uh, every 10th individual being a male or every 10th individual being a female. So if every time we are selecting the 10th individual and the 10th individual happens to be from a particular section, following a certain pattern, let's say for this example, if it is a female, then final selection will be biased. Third type is stratified random sampling. What is stratified random sampling? Here the population is divided into groups or into strata like gender, class, age, and then we do random sampling from each of these groups within each group. So if let's say, and we ensure proportional representation in our sample. How? If women form 40% of the population, let us say the original population has 40% women. So we ensure that even our sample will be 40%. If 20% of the population is working class female, then we ensure that the sample will also have 20% working class female. So what is advantage? Advantage is high representativeness. Why? Because we have ensured that. But also it requires smaller sample size. But what are the disadvantages? It requires detailed information. Now we are saying that we will divide the population into groups of gender, class, age. So these are different types of information which we need in our for our sample. So this will require detailed information, more background information of occupation, of age, of gender, of class, of income. So we need detailed information. So this was stratified random sampling. Next we get into quota sampling. Here there is no sampling frame. There is no sampling frame means the interviewers ensure specific quotas. The researcher fills pre-decided quotas. So researcher decides, for example, that they are going to interview 10 married women or 10 married men. So there is no random selection. We just make sure that the quotas are filled. This is mostly used in opinion polls where we want quick results. We want quick results for the study. But there will be disadvantages, that there will be biases, it will not be generalizable, and it would not be truly random, of course, but it is practical and flexible. And last we get into multi-stage sampling. What is multi-stage sampling? Multi-stage sampling means that this is sampling occurs in stages. Sampling occurs in stages. So first we select the constituencies, and from those constituencies we select the individuals. Like for example, we first select districts. From districts we select blocks. From blocks we select the villages from where we want to do the study. From the villages we study the households. So in every stage we are actually um, uh, doing sampling process. In every stage we are doing sampling process. Among the districts we choose the blocks, from the blocks we choose the villages, and from the villages we choose the households. So this saves time and cost, but it is less random at every stage. The randomness decreases. So these are the 5 types of sampling in probability sampling: random sampling, systematic sampling, stratified random sampling, quota sampling, and multi-stage sampling. After this, we will see non-probability type of sampling. Now we will study non-probability sampling. What is non-probability sampling? Where not every unit has an equal chance of selection. Why do we use this non-probability sampling? uh, let us imagine that if we have to study a population where the population is hard to reach, or it is not listed everywhere or anywhere, and the population is hidden. There we use non-probability sampling. Now let us get into the types of non-probability sampling. First being snowballing. Now this is a very specialized type of sampling when other methods are not practical, where there is no sampling frame. There we use snowballing. It is useful for hard to reach populations like criminals or drug users. Here the existing participants actually refer us to the other participants. So the advantage is it is practical, because when there are no lists easily available, this method is practical. But it has disadvantages of bias. Why? Because the existing networks actually help us to get into the existing participants actually help us to connect to the other members. So the networks which we are studying may not represent the entire group. We are able to study only those people which we are able to find or to access. So there are disadvantages of bias. But this method snowballing is helpful where there it is hard to reach population. Next, it is volunteer sampling. It involves people who are invited to participate via media or internet. Now, it has the advantage that people who take part are already interested in the topic. So, it is easy to collect data from them. The participants are motivated, so the responses are easy to collect. But again, this has the disadvantage of being biased. Why? Because we are excluding the non-volunteers. People who did not participate, we don't know their views on the subject we are studying. And last, non-representative sampling. Non-representative sampling is also called convenience sampling, where the researcher deliberately chooses people relevant to the research question. Here, the focus is on convenience, easily availability and accessible to the researcher. It is chosen entirely for practical reasons, also called convenience sampling. It is also known as purposive sampling. Why? Because it is chosen for a particular purpose. The purpose, for example, to test or to disprove theories. For example, feminist research. In feminist research, a feminist researcher choosing societies where women behave in ways more usually associated with men to falsify the argument that the differences in behavior of men and women are biological rather than cultural differences. So here the feminist researcher will be choosing those societies so as to falsify such notions. For example, a feminist sociologist might choose a matrilineal tribe in, let's say, in Meghalaya to study how gender roles operate differently, to challenge the notion of that patriarchy is universal. So they are actually choosing those parts of society which is convenient for them. It has a certain purpose. So it is very useful for theory testing and for case studies, but again it is not representative of the wider population, therefore cannot be generalized. So coming to conclusion, okay, before concluding, just let's have a recap. Non-probability sampling, where the population is hidden, difficult to reach, of three types. Snowballing, where the existing participant refers to the other participants in case of criminals or drug users. Volunteer sampling, where the people who are interested in the topic themselves participate. We invite them via media or internet. And last, non-representative sampling for a particular purpose, as in, for example, in feminist research. Finally, the difference between probability and non-probability sampling. Probability sampling is scientific, representative, and generalizable, whereas non-probability is practical, exploratory, but not generalizable. It is exploratory. Why? Because as we saw here in snowballing, that they are trying to study that part of society which is hard to reach. And with respect to non-representative sampling, we saw that how the feminist researchers are using it to debunk or to test or disprove theories. So it is exploratory in nature. So in short, probability sampling helps us to make statistically valid generalizations, while non-probability sampling helps us to explore sensitive, hidden, or theoretical areas. But a good sociologist knows when to use which, because scientific always does not mean that it is superior and practical does not mean that it is inferior. What matters is that whether our method, whether our sampling method answers our research question honestly and transparently, and therefore from the research question we move ahead which type of sampling we should use. So this we conclude the lecture on sampling. If you are new here, first of all, welcome. You are most welcome. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel, to Armchair Sociologist, where I'm trying to make even the toughest sociology concepts and topics easy to understand step by step by using the most credible of resources, that is Haralambos, Orange Book and Blue Book, and other resources like IGNOU and NCERT as and when required and relevant. Thank you for watching. Keep learning, and I will see you in the next lecture.